Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to our celebration of life for Keith LaMotte. My name is Michael Garrity. I'm Keith's oldest grandson, and I'll be hosting this event tonight. The realities of our current time have made it impossible for us to gather in person and celebrate my grandfather, but my family and friends have been working incredibly hard over these last 2 weeks to put together something to honor Keith in a way we are sure he would be proud of. We first want to thank my great uncle and aunt, Don Hamilton and Lorna St. John, and their team, Hannah and Matt at Hamilton Studio, for making all of this possible. As you know, my grandfather was somewhat of a people person, and their hard work and resources are making it possible for all of Keith's people to share in this celebration. Tonight, we will honor and remember my grandfather, hearing stories from family and friends about our many memories of Keith's extraordinary life. We will start with a prayer from Keith and Carolyn's youngest, Brady LaMotte.
Good evening. First, I want to thank each of you for joining us tonight to celebrate our father's life. The scripture I'll be reading to you was inspired by a vision my sister Andrea had a few days before Dad passed. Her vision was Mom coming down from heaven to take Dad home. It's from the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verses 1 through 7, and the passage is titled, "A New Heaven and a New Earth." Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the order of things has passed away." He who was seated on the throne said, "I am making everything new." Then he said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." He said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children." Let us pray. Heavenly Father, I just thank you for the wonderful gift that you placed on this earth on November 12th, 1938, by the name of Keith Lloyd LaMotte. We thank you for the life that he lived. We thank you for the family that he built and that we got to be a part of. We thank you for the love that he showered with us with throughout his entire life. And we thank you for the legacy that he leaves behind. Let us remember this in our thankfulness to you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
My grandparents were the first of our family to move to Spokane from California in 1975. They fell in love with the area after their trip here for Expo 74. Over the ensuing 40-plus years, our extended family in Spokane has grown to over 50. In addition, we have family members all over the country, from California to New York. Here are some remembrances of Keith from many of his family members and friends.
On a November day in 1938, Dad brought Mom home with son number 3, named Keith. I was 4 years and 4 months older. The second son, Alan, was only 15 months older. It would be almost 6 years before our sister Donna joined the family. Mom kept a diary on each child, handwritten, which she maintained well into our adulthood. In his, Keith was described as having very fair skin, and what little hair he had was blonde. There was a suggestion that he should be nicknamed Pinky. To Keith's undying gratitude, the name didn't stick. The distinctive solar panel, which along with his height made it easy to pick him out of the crowd. At one point, Mom described him as bold, meaning he liked to test limits, push buttons, never malicious, but always adventurous. two examples from his early teen years. Mom and Dad were on a short trip and were expected home the next day, we thought. Keith, still waiting for a learner's permit, decided to take the remaining car out for a test spin. Miscalculating our parents' return time, he was heading down our street when the folks passed him coming up the street. Keith turned around and sheepishly followed them home. It was a while before he drove again. Keith was also a good swimmer and liked to dive into the backyard pool from such things like high walls and low rooftops, both over a walkway. He somehow avoided disaster, but was finally caught and discontinued the practice. Because of the age span, Keith and Alan were often paired up. All of us got along pretty well, but when there was a sibling rivalry, it usually meant those two. Usually something as simple as, "He touched me," while in the back seat of the car with Mom driving. After a retaliation and reprimands to both, Keith for starting it and Alan for being a bully. When they were in upper elementary grades, they could switch from the mom-required piano lessons. Alan picked the trombone, Keith the trumpet, each accomplishing a professional skill level. Two often played together and were part of a combo called the Rhythm Kings that played dances and other events. The band was asked to get together again and play 40 plus years later when their two classes held a joint reunion. There's no need to repeat Keith's musical exploits to people in Spokane. Now a few words of gratitude. You're familiar with the story of the visit to Expo 74 and the decision to make Spokane their home. Keith and Caroline and the young school-age kids moved here in 1975. Over the next years, many came to visit. I was welcome in the wonderful High Drive Hotel. People on both Hamilton and LaMotte side of the family began moving here. Most stayed with Keith and Carolyn while finding and settling into their own homes. Also, Keith was the only one of us four siblings who picked up our father's skill with tools and desire to build things. He often showed up at others' houses bringing whatever was needed to get us out of trouble. They entertained families, friends, church groups, even Hoop Fest teams for years. If Expo was the catalyst that brought most of us here, Keith and Carolyn were the glue that kept us all together. Finally, I have to mention our shared passion for train rides. Caroline did not share Keith's passion, so after our family moved here in 2007, we started planning for a brothers train trip. In summer of 2008, we boarded the eastbound Empire Builder with its absurd 1:30 a.m. departure and went to Chicago. Over a long weekend, we saw baseball games with the Cubs one day, up to Milwaukee for the Brewers the next day, and back to Chicago for the White Sox. We both enjoyed baseball also. Keith, of course, was an ardent booster of Washington State University athletics, especially football. Wearing his usual WSU garb of shirt, jacket, and cap, we were walking toward our gate at Wrigley Field when a couple came out of the crowd and greeted Keith with the familiar "Go Cougs." The exchange would have lasted longer, but the game was about to start. Later that summer, we rode our bikes with daughter Donna and husband Tim and his parents through St. Paul Pass Tunnel on the Hiawatha Trail over the former Milwaukee Road right-of-way, abandoned in the 1970s. Keith and I could reflect back a half century when we rode the Olympian Hiawatha, the train that gave its name to the trail, on what became our first time in Spokane in 1956. We didn't get to appreciate the city because train time was about 3 a.m. and we all slept through it on our way to Seattle. Our last trip together was 1 year to the day, July 30th, 2019. We had taken the train to San Diego and were visiting Brother Alan in a convalescent home where he remains today. In God's time, he will join Keith, playing in the Heavenly Big Band together. To close, I'd like to paraphrase a line from the 1930s, uttered when George Gershwin died. Gershwin, composer, arranger, and pianist, and one of the earlier crossover musicians, excelling in both classical and popular idioms, died at a much too early age. It would go something like this. Keith LaMotte died on July 30th, 2020. But I don't have to believe it if I don't want to.
Hi, everyone. This is Keith's little sister, Donna, coming in from New York. I'm sorry we can't all be together to remember Keith, but this is the next best thing. I want to thank Andy and Jen and Brady for making this celebration happen, and more importantly, for their loving care of Keith during his final weeks and for their forthright reports about his condition. I'm sure we all remember Keith in our own ways, as a good brother, a good son, a good father and grandfather, a good husband, a talented trumpet player, a good friend, and overall, a good man. I always considered myself the luckiest girl in the world to have 3 big brothers. Keith was the youngest, but 6 years older than me. Terry and I were proud to name our son after him. A few days ago, I went through my photo albums, thank you, Mom, which brought back many happy memories. We took wonderful road trips as a family. Keith always seemed to be the one who fell in whatever body of water we stopped at, be it river, lake, pond, or ocean. There were occasional minor skirmishes, particularly over who got to sit in front of the air conditioning, blasting from the back of the Imperial. He loved being a cheerleader at Muir, and how he loved that bright yellow sweater with the JM on the side. We enjoyed endless swimming in our pool, with Keith occasionally taking clandestine dives from the cabana roof or the back wall. I followed him to UCSB. He left in the middle of the year, so he missed his graduation. At my graduation, he slipped on my cap and gown for a photo op with my mom and dad. He gave me a Kingston Trio album one Christmas before I even knew who they were. He was always ahead of the game on music. I remember his time with Stan Kenton, of course. Mom and Dad and I saw them play at Disneyland. One thing in particular I remember growing up on Midlothian, the house was always full of music. Bryce and Dad on the organ, Alan on his trombone, Mom and me on the piano, and of course Keith on the trumpet. His greatest legacy is the wonderful family he and Carolyn built together, and his children and grandchildren carry on not just his memory, but all his best qualities. Thanks for being there, everyone, for him and for us.
Hello, I'm Jeannie Finger. My dad is Alan LaMotte, one of Keith's brothers. Rather than tell a story of my own about Keith or talk about how much he means to me, which might make me get pretty emotional, I'm going to read some of my favorite stories from Grandma Laverne's memoirs. Grandma Laverne wrote stories and facts throughout the years of raising her kids, and Bryce, Alan, Keith, and Donna all got a copy of this book of memoirs, and I subsequently got a copy of it too. So the first story I'm going to read talks to the mischievousness of Keith, which makes me smile. So here's Grandma Laverne. We have a Plymouth and have bought an Austin. Sometime this year, Keith has his beginner's driver's permit. Once, Don and I are turning into the driveway just after Keith drove up the driveway driving the Austin. He never said a word, just parked and gave the keys to Donald and walked in the house. His punishment? Having to wait an extra 3 months to get his regular license. I think we can all imagine Keith doing some crafty activities in his teenage years. And here's a story from a few years earlier. I think he's about 10 or so. Keith is a challenge. His intelligence keeps his grades good, but he performs way below his capacity. He is popular and very friendly. At the dinner table one night, Keith learned that it was his turn for a trip to New York with Donald. He promptly lost his appetite and went to the phone to tell the good news to his friends. He has organized a club for boys who aren't popular, and they meet in the playhouse. Now, that story is so precious. I can just imagine Keith reaching out to boys in his school that maybe don't have very many friends. And Keith was popular, and he embraced them and thought of this way to support them in their school journey, which just really speaks to Keith about being a man for others. And I know we all miss him, and I love you, Keith.
Hi, we are Grandpa's grandkids, Dave and Andrea's kids. I'm Jordan.
I'm Brandon, and this is my fiance Riley. And I'm Justin, and we just wanted to say a few things about our grandpa.
I think one of the things we loved about Grandpa was how he was not afraid to speak his mind and how he had no filter. I remember one time after a Whitworth basketball game, we went to Olive Garden with some of my teammates, and we were getting salad, and the waitress was pouring cheese on the salad, and Grandpa turns to the waitress and goes, "Cheese me up, babe." And all of my teammates still call him that to this day. And I just think that just shows how he wasn't afraid to speak his mind and kind of why we love him so much.
One of my favorite memories was at Michael's 30th birthday last year. Michael was performing, and Keith and I were sitting in the corner, and we were talking about his music career and him growing up and all the things, but his favorite thing to talk about was his family, and he loved his family and his wife more than anything in the world, and it's a true testament to what an incredible man he was.
Memory I have of Grandpa Keith is just how supportive he was of all of us throughout our entire lives. We played a lot of sports, and growing up, he was always our biggest fan. He came to so many of our games. When I went to PLU and played basketball, we got him this PLU Grandpa t-shirt. He wore that to every single game that he attended. And then when Jordan went to Whitworth, I'm pretty sure he has a Whitworth Grandpa t-shirt or something like that he wears. And so he's just been an amazing man, and he's always been there for us.
Yeah, kind of related to that, one of the things I'll always be thankful for is an email thread that Grandpa and I had. Going back a few years, we would just talk constantly via email, just what's going on in the sports world, what's going on with me, especially when I was on the East Coast away from family. And he was just so invested in our lives and always checking on me. And that's what made him so special. And we love our grandpa.
We love you, Grandpa. We're going to miss you a lot, but we know that you'll always be with us in spirit.
Love you, Grandpa.
On September 30th, Grandpa Keith came to my adoption day, and he had pizza with me, and when I took him in soccer, he ate the whole entire thing. Love you, Grandpa Keith.
Hi, my name's Bill Long, and I've been asked to share a couple thoughts about Keith as a friend, but also a representative of our Summit Church community group that Keith and Carolyn were members of. For over 3 years now, my wife and I have had the privilege to be in a Summit group with Keith and Carolyn. I first met Keith over 30 years ago at Jen and Rick's wedding at their beautiful backyard on High Drive. That was my first encounter with this gracious host who made me feel right at home. Fast forward 20 plus years, and we reconnected with Keith as his grandson Michael became bandmates with my sons Kern and Riley. So back to our time with Keith in the community group. We were told by a very reliable source, Carolyn, that Keith kind of drug his feet a little bit in the beginning was not sure that he wanted to become a member of the group, where we meet a couple times a month with a small group of church members to share our lives, our stories, and support each other the best way we can with prayer and, of course, with God's help. However, I'm here to tell you that once Keith came to the group, I don't think there was one meeting in over 3 years where Keith did not express his gratitude for the group and each of us individually. I think if you look up the word gratitude in the dictionary, there's a picture of Keith LaMotte. I believe that this is one of Keith's virtues that made him so successful in life and also made him such a great father, grandfather, husband, brother, brother-in-law, uncle, and friend. Over the past week, I contacted members of our community group and others and asked them each to come up with a one-word adjective, if they could, that described Keith. The words all just flowed. They came out quickly. Everyone just had an instant word, and here's some of the words that came out. Keith was happy. Boy, Keith was a happy man. Generous, loyal, friendly, lovable, humorous, kind, gracious, fun-loving, that's 2 words, talented, humble, passionate, and optimistic. And boy, was Keith optimistic. He did not see the glass as half full. He saw every glass as having the potential to be 3/4 of the way full or completely full. I'm sure that if there's an optimist club in heaven, that Keith was immediately made president upon arrival. To conclude, speaking both from myself, my family, and our Summit community group, I would just like to express our gratitude for being part of Keith's life. We are richer in every way because of him. And one more thing, Keith, I promise I will think of you every time I see someone wearing anything with a WSU Cougar logo on it. Thank you.
Many of the most meaningful relationships my grandfather built over the years came from the musical community. After playing trumpet all through middle school, high school, and college, he went on the road with the Stan Kenton Orchestra from 1961 to 1962, touring all over the country and playing on many records. He remained an active performer wherever he lived. He was a founding member of the Spokane Jazz Society and played in the trumpet section of the Spokane Jazz Orchestra for 43 years. In addition to that, he played with countless different groups in the Inland Northwest, still gigging even after retiring from the SJO. Music, and specifically big band jazz, was a special bond that I shared with my grandfather. He was one of my biggest supporters as a musician, attending literally hundreds of performances over the years. He would attend my school concerts, jazz gigs, late night bar sets. After he passed, I had friends and fellow musicians reach out and remind me of times they saw him stroll into our downtown gig at 10 p.m., order a PBR, dance, make new friends, and occasionally even join us on stage. The proudest moment of my musical career was joining the Spokane Jazz Orchestra and sharing the stage with my grandpa for his last couple performances. We would carpool to rehearsals together, grab dinner at Baby Bar, and share in the special connection we had as performers together. Here are some highlights from Keith's musical career, spanning all the way back to his days learning trumpet in middle school, all the way to his final performance with the Spokane Jazz Orchestra.
We have a very, very special person in our organization who's playing his last show tonight, and that is our good friend Keith LaMotte, who's been with this organization since the very, very beginning. And okay, so we're going to give him a second. I dearly love this guy and love to play music with him and love to be in front of him and work with him. But I've known him for maybe 10 years, and there are guys in this group that have known him way longer than that. So I've asked Andy Plamondon to come out here and say a few words about Keith.
Playing in a group like the SJO is a lot like being in a family. And I'm going to speak on behalf of all the band because each one of us could get up here and tell you a story that would keep us to the wee hours before we even played our next tune. But in our family, Keith has got to be the godfather. He's the last original founding member of the band. And all of you probably know him as well as we do. You know, it goes without saying that he's an amazing trumpet player, a fantastic player, but an even better person and friend and colleague. And please, yeah. Talking with a couple of the guys when we had dinner before the day, we were talking about how welcoming Keith is. You know, you move to a new area as a musician and you introduce yourself, and a lot of times people are a little bit standoffish. You know, they're protecting their turf a little bit, and Keith couldn't be any more opposite of that. You know, he's just open arms and totally welcoming, and that's just who he is. You know, the old saying about if you haven't got something good to say about somebody, don't say anything at all. That's not Keith, really, because he always has something to say. And it's always good. It's always positive. It's always encouraging, inspiring, and it's just a joy. I can't think of another musician I've ever played with that I enjoy playing with more for that reason. And really, all I can really say on behalf of the whole band is that this is not really a parting. It's kind of like a child that goes off to college. You know things are not going to be quite the same, but the relationship is still there. In fact, it may get even stronger over time. It's bittersweet and a little bit sad in a way, but also wonderful in its own way. So thanks for the great playing, but even more important, thanks for the great times.
Thank you. Well, that's interesting. I've never gotten applause without doing anything. But this is a special organization. As you heard, I've been here for quite a while. And the thing about this band is it always gets better. And that's part of why I'm retiring. No, I mean, the truth is, as particularly Terry and Andy and Jesse would say, playing trumpet in a big band is a physically challenging thing. And I'm not as well adapted to physically challenging as I used to be. And the band keeps getting better. I mean, look at Jesse. Jesse just joined the band. So rather than find myself in a position like an old football player that's trying to extend his career and gets sacked every time, I thought I would try and do something that would let me leave on my own time and on my own situation. And when I mentioned this to Don, he said, well, okay, well, you need to play a solo. And I said, well, he said, I'll write one for you. And I said, well, if I have the choice, there's a song I first heard from the Stan Kenton Band in about 1953. And it's a piece that was written to highlight a phenomenal trumpet player who has passed on named Conte Condoli. If you may have known him, he was part of the Tonight Show band and lots of other things. Anyway, it's called Portrait of a Count. And it's really a nice piece. And it's the only trumpet feature ever written for the Kenton Band that I can play. So I'll do my best to give you my rendition of A Portrait of a Count. Well, thank you, folks. Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure, and I want to thank you all for supporting the Spokane Jazz Orchestra for the last 43 years. Thank you.
I saw a heart you hide so well. I saw a quiet girl who had a gentle way that caught me in its glowing spell. Why did I want you? What could you offer me? Just a love to last my lifetime through. And when I lost my heart so many years ago, I lost it lovingly and willingly too. If I had to choose again, I would still choose you.
Keith and Carolyn had 3 kids, Andrea, Jennifer, and Brady. Here are some remembrances from them and their spouses.
Hi, everyone. I'm Keith's oldest daughter, Andy. Growing up, my dad was larger than life to me. Not his size of 6'4", but his personality and the way he lived his life. As somewhat of an introvert myself, I think I noticed it more. I always felt unconditionally loved, no matter what I did, and I will forever be grateful for the life that both my dad and mom gave me. I always thought my dad was so cool when he was up on stage playing the trumpet in concerts when we lived in California. In Spokane, when the Jazz Society plays at the Riverfront Park for the 4th of July, and when he stood on his motorhome at WSU games and played the fight song. My friends loved to come to our house because my dad accepted everyone with a big smile, and he would put people at ease. He and mom welcomed people into their Spokane home for over 40 years, including the many Hoop Fest weekends where we had hundreds of our Seattle friends and family in and out of their house. My dad was so supportive of me, especially when it came to school and work. During college, he really encouraged me to go to the big city and have a career in accounting. His mom, Laverne, was an amazing example to him of a strong, hardworking woman. He wrote a letter to her after I graduated from WSU, and he opened up with, "As you can see from the attached, Andrea has completed her academic career in a manner that has absolutely no similarity to that of her father." And he always underestimated himself. When I moved to Seattle, I was very nervous about living on my own and starting my job downtown at Arthur Anderson. We got in the car one night. He showed me how to get to my office. We got into the building, and I think he talked his way past security. They led us into the offices and we walked the hallways. We ended up going into the managing partner's office where we got to look over the whole city. I'll never forget that night. When I married and started raising a family, he and Mom were there for the births of each of our kids, and they took care of our 3 boys when I was sick and had to be away from them for a while. We traveled back and forth across the state so many times over the years so we could spend time together. What warms my heart the most is the love he had for Dave and the boys, who he adored. Dad lived with Dave and me in Spokane over the last year after Mom passed away, and we were blessed to be able to have spent time together with Jennifer and Brady's families. He lived the last year of his life with grace and gratitude. He lost the love of his life, his family home, and then as he became more and more tired from the cancer, he decided to retire from his band, the Variety Pack, after leaving the Spokane Jazz Orchestra in 2018. But if you had the opportunity to talk to him during this time, all you would hear is how grateful he was for his family and his life. I told him so many times in the last few weeks what an inspiration he was to me, and he'll continue to be throughout the rest of my life. Thank you for everything, Dad. Until we meet again.
Hello, everyone. I am Dave, Andrea's husband and one of Keith's sons-in-law. My relationship with Keith began in 1989 when Andrea and I met and started dating. Keith was very welcoming to me and seemed to approve of how things were going until Andrea and I decided to go to Hawaii together on our 3rd date. As I recall, I did not ask for Keith's permission to do this, and he seemed a bit shocked about it. But I guess he liked me enough to allow it to happen. I learned my lesson from that, however, and I decided to ask for Keith's blessing a few months later when I planned on proposing to Andrea. I'll never forget that day, and like most guys, I was really just hoping for a yes response when I asked Keith for Andrea's hand in marriage. But I did not get a yes. Instead, I got a please, and not just one of those. I think it was, please, please, please marry my daughter. And so I obeyed him. After we got married, I quickly found out what a great handyman Keith was, which was very important since I did not inherit any of that gene from my own dad. Keith loved to fix everything in our house that was broken, and he even fixed many things that were not broken. He and I also spent many Christmas Eves together into the wee hours building toys or games for our boys. I would usually get out the instructions and begin the project, and then Keith would come over to see how I was doing and throw the instructions away. He would then proceed to build the item himself, which is what I had wanted him to do in the first place. Keith was a very loving father for Andrea and father-in-law for me, but he was even a more loving grandfather for Justin, Brandon, and Jordan. He was never afraid to hug them or show the pride and joy that he had in them. Grandpa Keith and Grandma Carolyn supported our boys in everything they did, especially in sports and especially in basketball. Every year in January, they drove over to our home in Sammamish from Spokane through the snow in the pass to watch the boys play at Eastlake. They also attended as many PLU and Whitworth games as they could when the boys played in college. Grandpa Keith was never very accurate in his stat keeping. When Justin scored 10 points, Grandpa said he had 20. When Brandon had 5 assists, Grandpa said he had 10. Or when Jordan grabbed 8 rebounds, Grandpa said he had 15. But I guess that's what grandparents are for. As you all know, Keith and Carolyn were also huge Cougar fans, and being a WSU grad myself, I was able to share in this with them, especially with Keith. He and I attended many Cougar games together or watched them on TV. One of the best times we had during this last year was watching the men's basketball team beat Colorado in the first round of the Pac-12 tournament in March. As we all know, the very next day, all of Division I college basketball was shut down because of the coronavirus. So the Cougar victory would be the last college basketball victory of the year. Logically then, Keith and I came to the same conclusion a few days later, that the Cougars are national champions and will be national champions until a new champion is crowned next year. Although I could go on with Keith's stories for hours, the last thing I want to comment on is what I consider to be the most important thing he taught all of us, and that is about attitude. Keith and I shared the feeling that a person's attitude is the most important aspect of their lives, and no one had a more optimistic attitude than him. He was always a glass half full guy, a guy who looked at life with joy and gratitude no matter the circumstances, and a guy who lived life fully in the moment. His life reminds me of one of my favorite sayings: the past is history, the future is a mystery, but today is a gift, and that is why it's called the present.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Garrity, Keith's middle child. I've often joked that I'm the favorite. It wouldn't be possible to explain all of the reasons why my father was so wonderful. From a very young age, I was acutely aware of just how warm and friendly a person he was. It was his trademark. Whenever I brought friends over, he went out of his way to know them. Well, hello, how are you? Tell me about yourself. He was always like this. Of course, I thought that was typical of all dads, but it really wasn't. No disrespect to the other dads out there, but he was special that way, and I was always very proud that he was my dad. Dad's involvement as a parent had no limits. He was never selfish with his time. He was there for us anytime, any place. He would drop everything for us. When I was newly married and expecting our first child, Rick was out of town for work, and I was alone in our little house. And I had a horrible nightmare that startled me awake in the middle of the night, and I was terrified. This grown-up married woman was scared to death. I instinctively called my folks' house, which I'm sure scared them too. And Dad immediately got in the car and came and picked me up and took me back to their house. And it is something that I will never forget. Nothing made my dad happier than being with his grandchildren, and his devotion to our family extended as the family grew. He took a genuine interest in each and every grandchild, how they were doing, what they were doing. He attended every event he could, and this included many cross-state trips over the years. My folks' grandkids were extremely close to them, and although it is not unusual to lose your grandparents, it's been particularly rough for our kids to lose my parents so close together. And this is a huge testament to the kind of grandparents they were, and we are so grateful for their legacy. When Mom passed away, we were all in shock, and our entire focus was making sure Dad was okay. I will never be able to thank Andy and Dave enough for giving Dad his new home since April of last year. This was the only thing he wanted, to live with family. It allowed us to spend as much time with him as possible, which became even more critical when COVID hit, and even more so when we learned his cancer was terminal. It was an honor and a privilege to care for him these past few weeks, and every moment we had until he left us. I wouldn't change that for anything. We spent time sharing stories and memories. We laughed and we cried, and we talked to Dad about being reunited with Mom. It was a precious time, and he was his typical upbeat and positive self until the end. God bless my dad. I am the luckiest daughter in the world.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Garrity. Keith was my father-in-law. I've been married to Jennifer for 32 wonderful years. Really struggled trying to come up with a way to express how much Keith means to me in just a short video clip. But here goes. If you were to look up what a father-in-law should be in the dictionary, you would see a picture of Keith as the example. He was always supportive, but never interfered. He was generous, not just with his resources, but with his time. He always was up for working on a home improvement project with me. He let me make mistakes without making a mess of the project. He always did that with his infectious smile. Measure twice, cut once. When I first met Keith, I was the older boy who came to visit his 17-year-old high school daughter. I was a little nervous, but soon realized that I had nothing to worry about. He welcomed me into their home and made me feel comfortable. That's just who he was. That's how he was with everyone. He made best friends everywhere he went. As everyone who is watching this can attest, Keith made you feel like you were lifelong best friends 5 minutes after you've met. It was never fake or forced. He generally had thousands of best friends. He knew everyone. There wasn't a city we visited where he didn't run into someone he knew. Whenever we had a layover at an airport, he would inevitably run into an old friend. I would hear, Keith, Bill, and I'm really going to miss him.
Back in 1994, Granddaddy LaMotte's memorial service, as I listened to Dad give a very moving tribute to his father, that was the first time I started thinking about what I would say about my dad when this day came. Number one, how he talked about being the chosen one to inherit his father's beautiful hairline, while both of his brothers never lost their hair. And since I'm Keith's only son, guess who gets the honor in this generation? Then he told us about the moment he would remember the most. Shortly after we moved up to Spokane, he and Granddaddy LaMotte said, "I love you" to each other for the first time ever. And Dad was 36 years old at the time. I understood that was more of a reflection of our grandfather's generation, but it was still so odd to me because I heard the words, "I love you" from Dad from the day I was born. That was the kind of relationship we always had. A primal, intimate relationship between a father and son that was very unique. Men by nature are not good at opening up their feelings and speaking genuinely and authentically from the heart. But Dad made it so easy for me to do so because he was the exception to the rule. If there was something important or weighing heavily on me, I knew I could always come to him about it. Any insecurity I felt or any awkward situation I found myself in was always received with love, empathy, and wisdom. 4 words I often heard from him in those moments were, "Son, I've been there." And then he would give me an example. One of the reasons he made it so easy for me to open up was because of the confessions he made to me about some of the wild things he did as a kid, like the 2 examples Uncle Bryce shared with us. Because of this, I knew I could come to him and confess just about anything without any fear or shame. Now, don't get me wrong, I was disciplined when necessary, but it was always constructive, and I always learned from it. He was always there for my sporting events, and I could always hear him cheering me on. In one of the football games I played in high school, he got into a huge argument with the officials on the sideline after a terrible call at the end of the game. I was speechless, but all my teammates were saying to me, "Brady, you've got the coolest dad. That was awesome." Dad always had a great work ethic. He taught me that you don't stop until you complete a task and do it correctly, no cutting corners, think outside the box when necessary, and always treat the people you work with like they were your own family. And we knew that he practiced what he preached to us based on the words of praise I've heard in the past from some of his old IBM colleagues he kept in touch with long after he left. I heard the same accolades from so many people he performed with in the Spokane Jazz Orchestra. I also got to witness firsthand the professional integrity he lived by when I worked with him in his Jostens business for my first 5 years out of college. I saw the way his clientele valued the relationships he built with them and the quality of work he provided. And I listened to the way his colleagues spoke highly of him as well. Dad was a man of unshakable faith, whose devotion to our family was second to none. Every challenge and trial we ever faced, we could always count on him for encouragement and a spirit of eternal optimism that we would persevere and overcome whatever the battle. When Mom had breast cancer, he stood by her like a knight in shining armor to comfort her and assure us that she was going to be okay. When Dad faced life-saving quadruple bypass surgery over 15 years ago, he kept us at ease and assured us that he would get through the surgery just fine, and he did. When we lost our mother last year so suddenly and without warning, Dad continually reminded us how his grief over the incalculable loss of Mom was always overshadowed by the joyful memories of the 55 years God had given him with her and how thankful he was for the family he had. And when we knew his cancer was no longer treatable, he was completely at peace with his life, secure in his relationship with our Lord, and he spent every remaining day with us filled with joy and contentment, surrounded by the people he loved the most. In closing, I want to take us back to 1996 when we gathered to celebrate our granddaddy Hamilton's life up at Rockwood. Uncle Don gave a powerful tribute to his father, much like Dad did 2 years before. And he concluded his tribute by saying to us, and I quote, "If I can be half the man that he was, I will consider my life a success." Well, Uncle Don, I now know exactly how you felt that day. Dad, we can never thank you enough for all that you did for us, and we smile knowing you are up in heaven right now, dancing with Mom again to Frank Sinatra's Fly Me to the Moon. We love you, Dad, and we'll see you and Mom again someday when God calls the rest of us home.
I was honored to be Keith's daughter-in-law, and I have a short story. I think it was probably the second or third year of marriage with Brady. We went over to Keith and Caroline's house at Christmas time. I remember the Hallmark channel was blaring loudly on the TV, and I sat down on the couch, and Keith came and sat down in his usual chair by the TV, and I thought he was going to turn the channel. I did not think Keith was going to listen to the Hallmark channel. And nope, he sat and he watched a movie, and Caroline and Brady joined us too. And he laughed the loudest of anyone. He smiled the biggest. He seemed to be enjoying himself the most of everyone that was watching the movie, although we all enjoyed the movie. Later that night when I was going to bed, I said to Brady, "Wow, I didn't know that your dad liked Hallmark movies." And Brady said, "Are you kidding me? My dad is the biggest hopeless romantic. He's a musician, for God's sake." So I was so blessed to be Keith's daughter-in-law, and that's just kind of a fun story that I remember.
My siblings and I were fortunate enough to grow up in the same town as my grandparents, and we had countless different experiences and memories of the times that we shared together with them. Recently, we've been reminiscing about all the wonderful times we had with both Grandma and Grandpa and all the different adventures we went on with them. Up next, though, are some individual memories from my brother Tanner and my sister Shannon.
Hi, I'm Shannon Garrity. I'm Keith's granddaughter, currently recording from the motherland, Pullman, Washington, wearing one of Grandpa Keith's many, many WSU t-shirts, which now I'm very excited I get to wear. One of my oldest and favorite memories of Grandpa was just how kind he was and how he made an effort to get to know anyone. It could be at the gas station, it could be at the grocery store. He would just take the time to get to know them. One of my earliest memories of Grandpa was the summer of 2005 when we were road tripping from Spokane to Southern California for the family reunion, all piled in the RV. He would stop at people's houses that he used to live in before they moved to Spokane and just knock on the door completely unannounced and just spark a conversation about, we used to live here and all this stuff. But that's the most Grandpa Keith thing ever. He was constantly doing that kind of stuff. We're going to miss him so, so much. And I'm so, so glad that he is reunited with Grandma back up in heaven, and can't wait to see him someday. We love you.
Hi, I'm Tanner Garrity. I am Rick and Jen's middle child, so that makes me one of Keith's grandchildren. Keith, my grandpa, he was easily one of the kindest men I ever knew. He always had a story for you as well. It was, did I ever tell you the story about ... and you fill in the blank? And, starting 5 years ago, it was the same story every time. But up until then, it was usually a pretty new story every time. You'd go over there and borrow a tool from him, and he'd spend 10 or 15 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes telling you the story of where he got the tool, what the clerk's name was, and then found a way to relate it to Spokane somehow. So that's just kind of how he was. But a short little anecdote that I have is while ago, we all got matching sweatshirts, all the grandkids and my grandpa as well. And it was actually this one right here, a good old-fashioned Coug sweatshirt. So at around the same time, there was a Super Bowl commercial for Bud Light, I want to say, and it was two guys walking into a room and they're wearing the same thing or they're drinking the same beer. I can't quite remember, but they just go, "Hey, we are same." And so I was wearing this sweatshirt, went to my parents' house, and then my grandma and grandpa showed up, and I was wearing the sweatshirt, and so was he. And he looks up at me and just goes, "You and I are same!" And he told that joke for every day probably, every time I saw him, and especially whenever I wore this sweatshirt. So that's just a fun little anecdote I have. Thank you.
There is a Keith LaMotte-shaped hole in the world that I'm sure can never be filled. He was absolutely a one of a kind. I was with him almost every day during his last few weeks, and he and I had wonderful conversations, something that I will sincerely miss. The support he received from friends and family during that time overwhelmed him, and he truly knew how loved he was. He wanted to make sure that all of his family and friends knew how much he loved them and how much he cherished their friendships.
Hey, you're already behind. People are part of playing. Late for every dance, selling each romance. Ooh, for what they're saying. Well, there will come a day when you both pass away. What'll they say about me? When the end comes, I know just below. Life goes on without an embrace. 'Cause I ain't got no love. Oh, get it wrong. It's ready dance, searching each romance. Oh, what they're saying. And there will come a day when you will pass away. What will they say about me? You're an old man. When the end comes, I know it's just that you alone. Your life goes on without me now. 'Cause I ain't got nobody. Nobody. There's nobody cares. Nobody cares for me. Nobody. Now I'm so sad and low. Sad and lonely. Want some sweet mama, come on, take a chance with me. 'Cause I'm so bad. And I'll sing now. Oh, all those sweet love songs all over the sky. She will only be. Lift me up and even do ain't got no money. Oh, and there's nobody cares for me. There's nobody.
And now, we stand to honor our country with the playing of the national anthem by Wilbur Jensen, Ben College's grandma, and Keith LaMotte, George Buster's grandma.
Brady LaMotte is going to close us in prayer. We're so glad you were here with us tonight.
Shortly before Dad went home to be with the Lord, Andrea, Jennifer, and I stood by him at his bedside and shared with him the Lord's Prayer, which we'll share with you right now in closing. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.
Thank you all again for being here tonight. Please enjoy Keith LaMotte's very last performance.